book.
It's really me. No, he didn't.
Just cross out the name. In the captions, just cross out Michael.
Michael.
Hi, Krista. It's a pleasure.
She was so sweet. She tracked me down last night to get me to sign.
Yes,
I my
we
little
had to.
celebrity time.
Where it goes to the right side. Everyone's name. Thank you very much.
I would like, first of all, to welcome so many distinguished visitors to this event. We are honored to have the ambassador from Switzerland, Your Excellency, welcome, and many other distinguished people from across the seas. I'd also like to welcome the young leaders who have come from all over the United States to honor Ambassador Whittlesey and to take place and to partake in all of these events surrounding the dinner last night and this event today. You here are visiting the Institute of World Politics. This is an independent graduate school which we started 22 years ago. And Ambassador Whittlesey was an integral part of the founding of this place, and she served as our board chairman for 6 years, but a member of our Board of Trustees for many more than that. This school simply would not exist without Faith and all of the remarkable work that she did to ensure that we could get going. I had the privilege of meeting Faith when I served in the National Security Council in the 1980s, and she had invited me to be helping her and the president in supplying national security briefings to the many leadership groups whom she brought to the White House constantly, indefatigably, in order to inform them about many of the key issues of the day that were not always being discussed fully in the pages of our major media. I'm forever grateful to Faith for the work that she did to serve our country and just incidentally to help me in my mission on U.S.-Soviet relations. Our school here exists, even though there are many distinguished universities in this country and many fine international relations programs in Washington, because none of them were teaching the different arts of statecraft. We who served in government, who were involved in the founding of this school, discovered that most intelligence officers never studied intelligence before going into their careers. Nobody studied counterintelligence. Most military officers never studied military strategy till late in their careers. Most diplomats never studied the arts of diplomacy, and particularly public diplomacy and cultural diplomacy and the different instruments of soft power before coming into their careers. There are all sorts of elements of economic strategy which have been systematically neglected, both in the academy as well as in the bureaucratic processes of our governments. We established this school precisely to teach these issues, to raise their visibility, in the hopes that if one could master all of the non-military arts of statecraft, it would minimize the necessity of having to use the military art. And yet, the military art always needs to be taken seriously and integrated. We here envision each of these arts as an instrument in an orchestra. And it is important, as many of you have heard me say, that one should be able to be a good trumpet player, but you cannot be blaring your trumpet loudly when it is the time of the symphony to listen to the harp. You have to be an integrated strategic thinker, and we need conductors of this orchestra who are even aware that there are such things as harps and bassoons and percussion out there in the orchestra, and many of our conductors are unaware of those instruments and do not integrate them properly into national strategy. So we have a unique, completely unique curriculum architecture here that is dedicated to the defense of our country, the broader ideas of, and principles that have brought us the freedom and prosperity in Western civilization, but we even have people from non-Western cultures come here, and so we're also dedicated to the defense of what we like to call decent civilization everywhere. I would now like, by the way, this building is 100 years old. It was a private mansion up until 1969. Shortly thereafter, it became the trade mission of the Soviet embassy and a KGB station, and it has all sorts of curiosities. We have a very good time here, enjoying that Schadenfreude that we feel we deserve after the long twilight struggle. Anyway, I would like now to introduce our current board chairman, who has been a chairman for probably a good decade, who succeeded Faith, one of the truly great leaders of this institution. Owen Smith. Owen is an attorney by profession. He's an entrepreneur. He has served as a senior government official in the New York State government, in Nassau County as a senior official there. He has been the chairman of the finance department at Long Island University. He has written an accreditation self-studies. He was probably the closest confidant of our late great Director of Central Intelligence, William J. Casey, and through his association with Bill, met his daughter, and eventually they got married. And we happen here to be the beneficiaries of the Casey family, because we have now Bill's personal collection in our library next door. It's an absolutely extraordinary portrait of a mind, which serves as an example to our students of what really one must master if one wants to reach the highest pinnacles of statecraft in our government. Anyway, I'd like to turn it over to Owen with admiration and gratitude for everything that he has done for our cause and for our country. Owen, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Lunchowski, and let me, on behalf of the board, also express appreciation to everybody for joining us here. I think I'm looking forward to a fun afternoon here. Particularly, would like to echo Dr. Lunchowski's welcome to the ambassador, Mr. Sager, who I met and spoke with earlier, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy our presentation also. There's a lot of fun things going on here at the Institute. There was when you were here, and Faith, you made this happen. I'm going to say some things about that later. But we have a lot of fun things going on. We've just instituted a new program, which Dr. Lunchowski didn't mention because we agreed I would talk about it, called Passport. And Passport is a mid-career continuing education program which we developed for the Army and Army personnel. We originally developed it for non-military Army personnel, but it turned out that we wound up with a lot of officers and senior enlisted officers in the Army who participated in it. We'll be bringing them up to date on current things in the intelligence and foreign affairs. I had the opportunity of attending the first class 2 weeks ago and heard Dr. Lunchowski's lecture, and I think everybody you could hear a pin drop in that room, and everybody was enthralled. I saw an awful lot of people writing an awful lot of notes, so I think we were very successful in that. Last week, we had another program, which I thought was a lot of fun. We had 2 former ambassadors, including Ambassador Milady, who's here with us, former United States ambassadors to the Holy See. And we looked at the role of the relationships between the United States and the Holy See and the Vatican, and particularly we addressed the impact of that relationship during the first half of the Reagan administration, or during the entire Reagan administration, but there was a period for the first half of the Reagan administration where the president had a personal representative in Rome, William Wilson, but we didn't have, because of statutory prohibitions that had been adopted decades before, we didn't have a full embassy ambassador. Then in '84, again, to a great extent because of some of the work that Faith, Ambassador Whittlesey did. I'm going to slip a couple of times. I should say Ambassador Whittlesey, but sometimes I'm going to slip and say Faith. I hope you don't mind because we've known each other for a lot of time and very well for a lot of time. But that relationship really, I contend, has a major role in the United States, in the U.S. relations with Poland, in the downfall of communism in Poland, and ultimately the downfall of the Soviet Union and the end of the Cold War. An awful lot of that, there was covert activity. The United States and solidarity, the United States provided covert funds and help to solidarity, and that was very important in what happened in Poland and ultimately in the Soviet Union. So I think we brought that out, and we have a précis of that now, and we will soon have a publication based on that. But this week we have a particularly significant and exciting event. You're here for it. Professor Thomas Carty, a professor at Springfield College, has done a book on faith, Backwards in High Heels. I have to admit, I saw this book an hour ago, and I scanned it. I can't say I read that in an hour, but I'm certainly going to read a lot of it on the airplane going back to New York tonight. Professor, you've done a wonderful job in putting this together. But that's not unusual for him. He previously did a great book on John Kennedy and a Catholic in the White House, John F. Kennedy, and that was a great book, and he'll probably tell you a little bit about it. I think he tried to knock down some myths about the role of Catholicism in that campaign. Now he's done one on Ambassador Whittlesey. I'm going to say a little bit about the ambassador that I know. She's a lawyer. She was a prosecutor in Delaware County, Pennsylvania. While in school, she taught school. While in law school, she taught school. And I think people may have suggested to you that it was going to be hard for you to get a job as a lawyer. And looking back, she's much younger than I am, but we were born about the same time. But I remember when I was in law school, there weren't very many girls in that class. Very few. I do remember when I took the bar review course. Lawyers have to take a course a cram course to try to pass the bar exam. When I took that, the professor who was teaching it liked to make points by telling dirty jokes. And I remember feeling sorry for the 3 girls out of 500 boys and 3 girls in that room. I felt sorry for them because he was telling all these dirty jokes, but that's the way it was. What? Don't? When she was a senior, member of the senior White House staff, public liaison, she was in the minority because there was probably not many women, if any, other than Faith, in that office, and in the senior White House staff. But Faith is not, from the Faith I know, is not the feminist that we read about and we hear about on TV today. She's one who believes that women should be in public life, women should be in politics, not because they're women, but because of what they bring to the table. And I certainly concur in that. The issues that we discuss here at IWP have always been Faith's issues. Back in 1980, now she was involved in the Reagan campaign, I know, in 1976, but in 1980, she and Congressman Jack Kemp chaired the subcommittee of the Platform Committee on National Defense. She brought that plank of the platform to the convention. As we all know, that was the beginning of Ronald Reagan's announcements, and that he wanted to see the downfall of the Soviet Union without use of American troops, without warfare. That happened. And that happened to a great extent because of a lot of the work that went on in the Public Liaison Office in the White House. A lot of work that Faith was involved in the White House, be it Iran-Contra, be it some of the other issues. Faith was very involved in those issues, and those have always been her issues. She was also involved in the campaign to change the law in 1984 so that we did have the formal recognition of the Vatican and formally recognized the Vatican. And when Wilson went from being a personal representative to an ambassador. She also served 2 stints as the United States ambassador in Switzerland. Many of you know more about that portion of her life than I do. But she was involved in a lot of very delicate negotiation, and I'm sure there's a lot more in here about this than I know, and I'm going to learn more about it tonight. But she was in a lot of very delicate negotiation involving the SEC and the Swiss banking officials dealing with the privacy and the SEC. That must have been a very, very delicate, I was watching it from a distance, but that must have been a very, very delicate conversation and negotiation, and she did it superbly. After she retired from that, she developed the Young Leaders Program, bringing young leaders from America to Switzerland. And I guess there's probably over 1,000 alumni, many of whom are in this room at the moment, of that program. And that's been a wonderful program. And a lot of young people who I've met over the years in various different capacities participated in that program, and she did a wonderful job. But there's one thing that I say, to me, is one of the most significant things that Faith Whittlesey did for this nation. And you're there. She and John alluded to this. She and John Linchowski and a fellow by the name of Don Bentley, who passed away on Monday, made this institution happen. Don Bentley helps financially. He owns the two buildings that we're in. He owns this building, he owns the building next door. And he made this institution happen. He endowed a chair. He's done a lot of things for this institution. And Faith, she was the one who made this possible. Her relations with Boston University, her ability to work within the system here in Washington made this possible. Dr. Linchowski, he had the spirit, he had the idea, and it's his spirit that my only role, Faith was my predecessor, as I mentioned, as the chairman of the board. My only role is to follow on the great work that Faith did. And I thank you very much for that, Faith. Now for some details on what this is all about, I'm going to call upon the author. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Smith, and thank you, Dr. Linchowski, and to all the people involved in the Institute of World Politics for making this possible, and the American Swiss Foundation for a wonderful conference which we had, a Young Leaders Reunion these past few days. And thank you all for coming in this beautiful sunny afternoon, and you took the time to come and to hear a few words. And this is a testimony, I know, to Faith Whittlesey. We had a wonderful gala dinner last night, and yes, she did introduce me as a Democrat last night, and it's true. I wrote a book about John Kennedy, a lot of strong family history, Irish Catholic, born in Boston, so I was destined to be a Democrat. And you know the quotation, of course, if you're not a liberal when you're young, you don't have a heart. And I forget there's another part of that quotation, but I can't remember the rest of that. But some of you might remember, right? So I'm still young. But I have a little surprise for you, which some of you may know. But in my investigations, I learned that Faith Whittlesey was a liberal Democrat, if I may dare say, in her youth as well. So she indeed fulfills this quotation. So I want to also say some special thank you to some of the people in the room tonight who I interviewed for this project, and it's very nice that this was 3 years in the making, these interviews, and all of you contributed so well to the book and made this book possible because you gave me the material. I interviewed more than 100 people, but still, number 113, I still learned something new and fascinating about Faith Whittlesey, and I think this was a testimony to how she is humble, and she's not just spilling the whole story, as maybe we have a culture today where we want to promote ourselves, and she's not that kind of person. I had to learn this through many different people. And then finally, of course, Faith Whittlesey made herself available to me, and we had some nice conversations, and then we'd be speaking, and then after a couple hours, she would say, "Do you want to take a break?" And I would say, "Oh, if you want to take a break, sure, that'd be fine." But she said, "No, I'm just worried about you. Do you want to take a break?" And then she would make me a tuna sandwich, and so it was just she made it very, very comfortable. So to get to the subject of the book, I don't want to give away all the secrets in the book. I want you to read the book, but this photo here, of course, is Ronald Reagan and Faith Whittlesey in Geneva, which I'll try to talk about a little bit later. And as you know, there was an important conference when Ronald Reagan met Mikhail Gorbachev, and there's a chapter in the book that discusses that experience. But I also wanted to talk a little bit about, I'm going to move up so I can see the three things I basically try to discuss. A little bit about what was mentioned by Dr. Smith, Faith Whittlesey as a woman politician at a time when there weren't so many women. In fact, for a few facts, of course, Faith Whittlesey entered law school in 1960 at a time when 3% of law students were women. So this was a true path breaker. This was 10 years before Hillary Clinton was in law school. So people like to look to Hillary Clinton or Geraldine Ferraro as the path breakers, but really Faith Whittlesey was there before many of the names we're more familiar with, which is why I think one reason this book is so important is that she really was a path breaker. Then, of course, she entered politics in the early 1970s when less than 5% of American women were in state legislatures. She fought and was elected to the legislature in Pennsylvania at a time when in Pennsylvania, in her county, Delaware County, there was, as you've heard, maybe the proverbial smoke-filled rooms with men and old boys network, and she struggled her way to bring in some people into politics, like suburban women and young college students, and some of them are in the room tonight. They're in the book, and they were interviewed here. Some of those suburban women, some of those young men who were kind of inspired, I think, by an outsider. Of course, she also was elected to the county council at the time of Watergate. There was a lot of suspicion of politicians, and there was a lot of discomfort with the way politics as usual. And she brought some of that outsider status that Ronald Reagan, of course, caught the wind of and rode to the presidency. And as you've heard, she was the highest-ranking woman in Ronald Reagan's White House staff. And again, this is just underreported. People haven't talked about this. There were 17 men on the senior staff and 1 woman. And I can imagine there were some challenging gender dynamics there. So, as was mentioned last night, the ambassador to Switzerland 2 times. I don't know if there's another case of a woman of a man appointed to the same country twice, as Justice Scalia says, double dipping in that case. And then, of course, a member of several boards of directors. And even today in 2012, less than 16%, I think, is the number of women that are on boards of directors of major corporations. So there's certainly, as a woman, there's certainly some themes. And that's why I chose the title, Backwards in High Heels. Because if you don't know the story, as was mentioned last night, they said that Fred Astaire was a great dancer, but Ginger Rogers was doing everything, all the moves that Fred Astaire was doing, simply backwards and in high heels. And I think that's apt for the way that Faith Whittlesey was able to manage in a world in which she was certainly a pathbreaker for women. There were no real role models for women, no real career role models for women. So I do want to read a small passage, a paragraph in the book, because there are some people who are young leaders in the room, and maybe they remember their first introduction to Faith Whittlesey was Ambassador Whittlesey greeted us as we were arriving in Switzerland, and she had a plate and silverware. And so she was introducing us to the proper etiquette of Swiss dining. And so we got a certain angle of Ambassador Whittlesey as very proper, very formal, and very distinguished ambassador. But I want to read you a quick story about one of her scenes. This is just after the Geneva conference. And I don't see Douglas Sears in the room tonight, but this story is from Douglas Sears. State Department Officer Doug Sears graphically recalled riding 100 miles an hour on a Swiss highway sometime between 1986 and 1988. The large, heavy, 4-door Oldsmobile sedan, specially retrofitted and armored for U.S. government use, did not handle very well, and the passengers could feel each bump in the road. U.S. Ambassador to Switzerland, Faith Whittlesey, sat next to Sears in the back seat, while the ambassador's chauffeur barreled the limousine down the highway. Attempting to insert contact lenses into her eyes, all the while, Faith Whittlesey kept requiring, "Where is my speech?" In Sears' retelling more than 20 years later, he pauses frequently while trying to contain his laughter at an event which still seemed surreal to him. "I'm watching this. I've got my seatbelt on because I don't want to die young, and she has no seatbelt on." So here was another side of Ambassador Whittlesey that I learned about in this time here. Too close, thank you. Well, okay, so I think what Ambassador Whittlesey, I would talk about it. Here's a young picture of Faith Whittlesey running for the state legislature. I think, as was mentioned by Dr. Smith, that she was certainly a model for women, but yet not a feminist, not one that ran with the organized women's groups, but that she, I think what she learned is that it was an unplanned life, really. She didn't set goals like a traditional male career track to say, I'm going to be, by the time I'm 30, I'm going to be at this level, and by the time I'm 40, I'm going to be at this level. This was an unplanned life. And I think what she provides is a model that you don't need to necessarily follow a particular track, but you can develop general skills, and she certainly did that over her life. Skills from the government, skills from business, and skills from the nonprofit sector. And so what I found is that she certainly worked hard. We certainly know the work ethic, and she certainly took risks. And she certainly took moments to take risks. And, but overall, most importantly, she really paid attention to relationship building. And this, I'm sure, will resonate with those who know her, the relationship building and building trust. And this is one of the big themes, I think, in her life, building trust between countries as well as between people. And as I thought about this, I said, this really sounds like entrepreneurial skills. And I characterize in the book really as a political entrepreneur. So I won't spend too much more time on that. The early chapters talk a little bit about her early life. But when I say an unplanned life, here's perhaps an example. That as she was running for the legislature, she was pregnant. In fact, she gave birth 2 weeks before the election. So here she was in her debate campaigning for the state legislature. So this is certainly one theme that Faith Whittlesey was someone who, as I said, was an outsider, supported Ronald Reagan, who was also an outsider, who was challenging the idea of politics as usual. Second theme I wanted to mention tonight is diplomacy. And to speculate a little bit about when Faith Whittlesey, of course, established a relationship with Switzerland. And in particular, as was mentioned briefly earlier, she dealt with an issue which really resonates with some of the issues between the United States and Switzerland today. In particular, she dealt with an issue in which the long-term relationships that she was working on establishing became important. Political scientists have talked a lot about the theme of soft power, that countries should try to use persuasion rather than coercion, try to attract the support of other countries. In fact, some speculate that the Cold War was really won because of the attraction of American rock and roll, music, movies, Hollywood movies. But I think more than this, Faith Whittlesey offered something more than soft power. It wasn't just a slick marketing idea that you could attract people through marketing gimmicks, but she would rather characterize this as public diplomacy. And as Dr. Linchowski mentioned, this is a founding value of the Institute of World Politics, that diplomacy has to be built on strong relationships. And so first of all, I should say that Ronald Reagan set the tone for this, because Ronald Reagan expected that his ambassadors would know something about the countries to which they were assigned. And Faith Whittlesey knew something about Switzerland. She knew the German language, and so she came with this experience. However, she didn't just rest on her laurels. She tried very hard to learn more about the country before she was assigned to it. So, for example, she was, as all appointed ambassadors do, they are required to go to the Senate for confirmation, and they're prepared by the executive branch, by the State Department, for confirmation. So when she went for her confirmation hearings, the State Department informed her that, well, there's a big issue in Switzerland right now. There have been protests against an opera house. They've been building an opera house and with public funds. And so some of the Swiss have been protesting by marching naked down the Bahnhofstrasse. So they've been breaking the Chagall windows in the Fraumünster Church, and there's been these great challenges to U.S.-Swiss relations. And Faith Whittlesey listened, but she thought maybe there's more to this. Maybe there's more to this U.S.-Swiss relationship. And she soon found that there was more to the U.S.-Swiss relationship, that there was a serious banking crisis, and that essentially the crisis was something that she learned about through her law school classmate who had called her and told her that beyond the extracurricular activities of the people in Zurich, that investors in investors in Swiss banks had been using the Swiss banks to trade in U.S. securities markets using privileged information. In other words, this was insider trading. This was illegal under U.S. law. So the Securities and Exchange Commission, the Treasury Department were prepared to go after the Swiss banks, to require them to hand over names to the Justice Department and to prosecute. In fact, the judges were prepared to give $50,000 a day fines to the Swiss banks if they wouldn't divulge the client data. Now, some people would say, well, what's the problem with this? This is breaking a law, right? Well, the problem is that, yes, the Swiss and the Americans had a treaty of cooperation. And the treaty said there would be cooperation with judicial assistance, but Switzerland did not have any law against insider trading at the time. So you can see this is, in a sense, applying American law, extraterritorial application of American law, applying American law within Switzerland. And the Swiss said, actually, it's worse than this. We have a law that requires banking privacy, that requires the privacy of client accounts, banking secrecy, some call it. So actually, the United States is asking us to violate Swiss law. Duly elected legislatures have passed law in Switzerland, and the Americans are trying to apply American law in Switzerland. Does it sound familiar to some of the people who know something about the United States and Switzerland? There's a similar case today about tax evasion and tax fraud, which America, this is the law is one way, and in Switzerland it's another. So there's a gentleman here tonight named John Fetters, and John Fetters was the Director of Enforcement, and he's the gentleman off to the left here, and he's sitting in the center of the room back here tonight. He was the Securities and Exchange Commission Director of Enforcement. And he's pictured here with a man named Edward Green, who we worked with, and the Securities and Exchange Commissioner, John Shad. And you'll recognize Ambassador Whittlesey and Jean Zwalen, who was a Swiss government representative at the time. And I'll just tell you a little bit about the story, about how Ambassador Whittlesey was able to intervene and reduce tensions over this issue, because the tensions were very high here. So Ambassador Whittlesey met with the Swiss bankers, and she understood their side of the story. She met with the U.S. government representatives, and she understood that there was a rational argument on both sides. There was a logical argument on both sides of this issue. And I think what was key here is she applied something that political scientists and psychologists use often to describe this emotional intelligence. She was able to understand the characters and the personalities. She was able to apply emotional intelligence and to lead us out of this potential bilateral crisis. So she invited John Fetters, the Securities and Exchange Commissioner, to Switzerland. And I'll just read a passage here, and you have the source here. Of course, you have Mr. Fetters to ask to elaborate on this, but I'll just read briefly a passage here. John Fetters recalled arriving in Switzerland prepared with scripted talking points. In Fetters' memory, he planned to lecture the Swiss that they must subject themselves to U.S. law if they want to trade in the U.S. stock market. And I'm quoting, "My buzzwords were the integrity of the marketplace and transparency," Fetters recalled. He had given a lot of thought to the importance of prosecuting insider trading. In a late 1981 interview with the Wall Street Journal, he argued that the emerging information technology revolution required regulatory regimes to guarantee fairness, decency, and law. There was a lot of pressure on John Fetters. There was a lot of pressure on the Securities and Exchange Commissioner because the U.S. government was a newly elected Ronald Reagan administration, seen as perhaps too friendly to business. Perhaps this administration would look the other way on inside trading. In fact, John Shadd had said, I'm going to come down with a hobnailed boots on insider trading. There was a lot of political rhetoric, in other words, that had heightened the tensions on this. So Ambassador Whittlesey decided that when the American delegation of John Fetters and Ed Green and some of the Americans arrived in Switzerland, she decided not to take them right into the boardrooms for discussions, but she decided to take them into the Swiss Alps. And they took a hiking trip. And as John Fetters recalled, he said, I hadn't brought hiking clothes, but I remember the adventure as a learning opportunity. We were going up these mountains, and I was wearing Fifth Avenue Allen Edmonds shoes and suit pants and freezing my tail off. But we were having fun. So this was a way to kind of reduce the tensions. Again, apply some emotional intelligence to the situation and try to deal with the personalities rather than just with the facts on the table. The experts could work on the facts, but what was the environment they'd be working on? So there's just one more story I'd like to tell about this. That, as you'll see, Mr. Fetters a little bit later, he's 6'10", and he was a basketball player in college at Marquette. And so when he got out of the car, we saw a presentation this week which depicted the United States as an elephant and Switzerland as a mouse, and considering that the population of the United States is so high and so much larger, 300 million versus 7 or 8 million. And so this comparison was clearly evident when John Fetters steps out of the car, and there was another Treasury Department representative who was also 6'9", and the Swiss were looking up saying, what is coming towards us here? But again, Faith Whittlesey and John Fetters spoke about this. They worked together, and they said, what can we do to reduce the tensions here? And so this is one example of what they came up with. John Fetters decided he would give a talk to the Swiss-American Chamber of Commerce, and he knew his audience expected a pedantic lecture. They expected a very dry, kind of maybe a lecture which was looking down upon his audience, or kind of like a professorial, excuse the professors in the room like myself, a professorial lecture. But so what he decided to do is to kind of relax the tensions by offering something light. And here's what he said. Having read newspaper reports about the protests in Bern over the Opera House, he said, you may not know this about me, but I was an opera singer as a young man. And I sang at the Zurich Opera House. And when I finished, the audience kept clapping and clapping and yelling, encore, encore. And so I sang 4 or 5 encores. And he theatrically took out his handkerchief, and he portrayed himself as an opera singer. And then he invoked the name of Rainer Gut, a well-known banker who Ambassador Whittlesey had informed him about, and I'm sure still is a name that the Swiss will recognize. And she said, so John Fetters continued that Rainer Gut was in the audience that day. And after so many encores, I leaned over. I saw Rainer Gut in the front row, and I said, how many encores do I have to do? And without missing a beat, Fetters apocryphally reported that Gut responded, until you get it right. And so I think by sort of setting himself up in this way, and for an American to sort of portray himself in a humble way rather than in a lecturing way, John Fetters was able to ease tensions. There were several meetings, and there's a lot more to the story that you can read about, but the Swiss were willing to take more risks. The Americans were willing to take more risks. As she had reduced the tensions, as she had made a more familiar environment, there was more trust. And as we were talking at this conference the last few days, that's something that sometimes can be missing in these bilateral relationships is trust. So eventually there was a memorandum of understanding signed, and that's what this photograph represents, that the Swiss came to the United States, they signed the memorandum of understanding, and this is why there was no big news stories, there were no lawsuits in the 1980s. This is sort of an untold story because Faith Whittlesey was able to keep the debate on a diplomatic track, to keep the tensions on a diplomatic track and off the public relations politicized in the media track. Well, there are plenty more stories, and I won't spend some time. I'd be happy to take some questions, but I'll just show you a few more stories. Here's Ambassador Whittlesey dancing with the president, Kurt Fergler of Switzerland. And so again, this was an example of the emotional intelligence. She was able to bring together people in sing-alongs. She would, and her daughter Amy was here, would sing, they would play piano, and I think just make a familiar environment so the American and Swiss didn't feel like they were foreigners, they didn't feel like they were counterparts, they felt like they were friends. I even was told by some Swiss that, including Patricia Schramm, that people from different parts of Switzerland were brought together in ways that they hadn't been brought before. So she even united Swiss among themselves from different parts of Switzerland. This also included some skiing, and of course, and then of course it led eventually to the Young Leaders Conference, and this is Young Leaders Conference 2010. I may just read one more passage about the Young Leaders Conference, and there's just, I guess, one more lesson, I think, is how was Faith Whittlesey able to capture this, to let Americans understand Switzerland and Swiss to understand America. And there's several chapters in here about how she worked in the White House. And I think she had the same outlook in the White House and in Switzerland, and as a politician in Pennsylvania. She wanted to get to know her constituents. In Pennsylvania, she went out, she shook hands, she met the people, she went to events, she went to speakers, she went to town fairs, and the same thing in Switzerland. She went to all the cantons, she interviewed at all the newspapers, she did interviews with anyone possible. She'd speak to all the groups that she could. And in the White House, she did the same thing. When she was director of the Office of Public Liaison, again, this is something that just hasn't been researched and hasn't been discussed. The Office of Public Liaison is the link between the American interest groups. So this really is a critical office because you are the interface between the American people and the White House. And she brought in groups from the Farmers of America to the and Susan Graff's nodding, you can tell me all the different interest groups, I'm sure. The Farmers of America, all the different ethnic groups, the religious groups, the conservative groups, the liberal groups, the Cuban Americans, and she went down to Florida to meet with some of the Cuban Americans. And so my message here is that she understood every part of America. She understood the different interest groups. She understood the different geographical groups in the United States. And she did the same in Switzerland. She understood the different languages. She understood the different cultures. And so I think when it came for the Young Leaders Conference, which she created, it was a natural. She could pick out the people who could explain America to Switzerland, and she could pick out the Swiss that could explain Switzerland to America. So maybe I'll just read one brief passage on this. Whittlesey's political experience in both the United States and Switzerland proved vital to the Young Leaders Conference. Very few Americans had a more intimate understanding of both nations. In 2 years as the White House Director of Public Liaison, she had interacted with a broad spectrum of American interest groups, representing professional associations, business, labor, religious, and ethnic organizations in all 50 states. As U.S. Ambassador in Switzerland for nearly 5 years, Whittlesey had similarly engaged with all regions and social sectors of that nation through all her active public diplomacy agenda. This unique degree of contact with a wide spectrum of two countries helped her design a conference based on a truly consequential exchange, a truly genuine exchange. Whittlesey's knowledge of both the United States and Switzerland informed her preparation of all program details, such as setting, recruitment of participants, and curriculum, and the list could go on, I'm sure, fundraising and sponsors. And so I guess I just, what do I have here? Maybe one more photo of Ambassador Whittlesey with Ronald Reagan. There's so much more I could say, but I just wanted to highlight a few points that, as you mentioned last night, she was reaching out to the working class, which is, again, something that she said the Republican Party maybe is not doing such a great job on these days. So in conclusion, I think that Faith Whittlesey represents deserves more recognition among women pioneers, women politicians and pioneers. And she also provides a blueprint, which our diplomats should follow today, about how the United States might gain greater respect in the world. And I guess if I were to summarize that, I'd say it's by more listening. She clearly did listening. She clearly used emotional intelligence to listen to what the other side is saying, to put yourself in the other person's shoes, as my grandfather always used to say. And relationship building. Oh, so why did I ask for questions? What surprised me the most? What surprised me? Well, what's coming to my mind, I think, is the importance of music in developing the mind. I know that one thing in her early life I discovered is that her mother, Amy Colville-Ryan, insisted that she play the piano. And did you wake at 5 or 6 in the morning? Sometimes 5 in the morning, 6 in the morning to play, and then maybe another session in the afternoon. And I think that certainly the discipline was a lesson, but also the development, I think, of the mind at that age. And I think that was something that made an impression on me, because my wife has done the same with my daughter. Maybe not exactly the same, but she's insisted that she learn piano, and I never really had an appreciation for that. But I think it really was something. We talk about multitasking today. I can't imagine coordinating right and left hand, and how that must have developed the mind and her appreciation for culture, but also her mental acuity. So, thank you. Other questions?
In the back there.
Yes.
Congratulations on this wonderful book.
Thank you.
We know that Faith was a really outstanding ambassador to the United States, from the United States to Switzerland, and that by creating an institution in which 950 young leaders have become, and thousands others have been touched, that she's really never stopped being an ambassador to Switzerland. It seems that there's such an extraordinary thing about the love of the country and the love of the United States that creates something we really don't see with a lot of ambassadors. You know, also, Olivia were talking about the ambassadors and how much connected friends of everyone, and also very hard. It's just, are there other ambassadors who created these kinds of lasting institutions, friendship, communication, or is this something really unique that we have to follow? This by itself being the reason to read this book.
Interesting question. And this raises the issue of, we have many ambassadors, and it raises an interesting question of political ambassadors and career ambassadors. And of course, Faith Whittlesey was a political ambassador, in that she was appointed as a politician, not as a member of the State Department bureaucracy, and the Foreign Service. And I think that gives a certain flexibility to her position. And in fact, there was a quotation from the State Department that said this was a breath of fresh air that we had Faith Whittlesey come into this. So I think it is kind of a lesson for all ambassadors, and to look at the job in a more, as I say, as a political entrepreneur, and look into this position. Are we short on time?
We're a little short on time,
okay,
but
sure.
we're a little short on time. But before we adjourn, I would like to have Ambassador, I'm being very formal, Ambassador Whittlesey, say a few words, if you'd like to.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you, Owen. Thank you, Dr. Smith, for hosting us here as chairman of the board. It was in these rooms that we had the meetings that made this institute such a success. And they were long meetings, and there were many challenges. But I am so proud of what has been achieved here with my former colleague, Dr. Lenchowski, who really helped Ronald Reagan in the National Security Council in ways that most of the history books have not as yet revealed. But I learned a lot from Dr. Lenchowski, and we worked together with my experiences and his, and I think we were able to help the president explain to the American people what he was trying to do in ways that would make the policies understood, better understood in the United States. And one thing I think, and I'm also thankful to Tom for having conducted all these interviews. The book took a lot of time, I think. How many years behind are we? 3 years behind. And Owen Smith is the son-in-law of the great William Casey, who was the chairman of the Reagan campaign, I believe, after there was a firing after
there was some disagreement. Early in January of 1980, there was some disagreements, yes. And I remember I was with my father-in-law when he got the call to come up and have breakfast with Ronald Reagan. He actually got that call from Nancy. That hasn't been publicized. And he got that call and he went up, and then he came back 2 or 3 days later and said to me, "Should I really do it?"
But he did it, and the campaign was successful. And I worked in Pennsylvania primarily because it was, as it is today, a large battleground state and with a lot of votes. And I went all over the state. I learned a lot about the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And we won by a landslide in Pennsylvania, 325,000 votes. And when Gerald Ford had run in 1976, after the sitting president, Gerald Ford, defeated Ronald Reagan for the nomination, Pennsylvania was lost by 125,000 votes. So Ronald Reagan was a hero to me, not because I knew him personally, because I didn't. I got to know him by reading about him, and then later supporting his candidacy against great odds in my own small area of Pennsylvania, where everybody was supporting George Bush or John Connally or someone else. And I'm so thankful that I was able to provide that small measure of support which elevated him into the White House. The struggles that Ronald Reagan encountered were ferocious. And I think today, when he's quoted as a sage, as I said last night, by Bill Clinton and President Obama and some other people, we don't realize just how difficult the challenges were at the time, not only in winning the nomination against the wishes of the Republican establishment, which was united against him. And then once he got into the White House, carrying out his policies, attempting to, he had to overcome resistance from the opposition party, which naturally is very active and articulate in making its points, but also, again, within his own party. There were clashes inside the White House that reflected policy disagreements about how best to proceed as a country. And we see some of those differences evidenced today in the news about the Republican candidate and his chances. But I learned a lot about the American people, and because I have 10 grandchildren, and I had 3 wonderful children, I wanted to make my country a better place. I wanted to restore or maintain the reputation of the United States and to inspire future generations to do the right thing, to keep our prosperity and our freedom. And I am reminded that it takes a lot of work. A democracy is a fragile thing, and all these freedoms we enjoy are not necessarily guaranteed for the future. We have to work on them. And that's what's so remarkable about what has happened here at this institute. The people here, under the leadership of Owen and John, are training up the next generation who will be in a position to defend morally ordered liberty as set forth in the Constitution of the United States. And this is a unique place, and some of the subjects studied are not taught anywhere else. And the foreign policy elite of the United States is a rather small group. And they have all the problems of a small group. Sometimes it's groupthink. And as General Patton once said, if everybody in the room is thinking the same way, then someone is not thinking. So this is an institution that builds upon the idea of dissenting voices with ideas which we should take seriously and pursue. And about my friendship with the Swiss people and Switzerland, I would like to say that I have great admiration for the Swiss and for what they've accomplished against difficult odds. Right now, things are very tense, and there's a lot of ill will towards the United States for the way we have treated them. And it is my fond hope that there will be a resolution to these tensions, because Switzerland over the years has been vitally important to the United States. And we cannot afford to fracture a relationship with a country that has been so strongly affiliated with us, even though politically neutral. Switzerland is never and never has been morally neutral. We all believe in the same ideals. But I'm sad now when I go and I hear the reactions of people about what has occurred, what is occurring in the United States. So to the Americans who are here, I say we must redouble our efforts and do a better job of listening and of being aware of our own foibles as a nation and not going around the world in a spirit of triumphalism. We have challenges in the United States right now that are very difficult to overcome inside our own country. But they must be faced and they must be overcome. But at the same time, we have to do what was stated in our Declaration of Independence. We must have respect for the decent opinions of mankind. That's why the Declaration was written, because the founders, the brave men who wrote that Declaration of Independence set forth the reasons for their split with Great Britain, because they wanted the rest of the world to know. They were respectful of the opinions of the rest of the world, and they wanted the rest of the world to understand what it was that brought us to that point of dissolution with the great empire of Great Britain at that time. We shouldn't forget that. We're seeking the respect of people around the world, and we need to constantly refine and improve our way of doing that. So I'm very thankful to Tom for having done all the work for this book. I hope it will contribute in a small way to a better understanding, not only of the political struggles here in the United States, but also of the country to which I was assigned by Ronald Reagan, the Swiss Confederation, and help build on the relationships that we've enjoyed with that Swiss Confederation for the future. There are a lot of young people here who are going to be taking the reins of power in our government agencies. They're students here. They're going into that foreign policy elite. And I say to all of you, listen carefully, read widely, listen to all kinds of opinions, and then again, be somewhat humble about yourself and actually our own country, that we can learn from other countries. We need to. And the Swiss provide a pretty good model. And so I thank you all for your kind attention. And I look forward to sharing your opinions of some of the stories that Tom has recounted. And also I want to say thank you to people in the room like John Fetters, who was a brilliant negotiator. No one's ever written about it before. Without his work and that of many others here, there would have been a huge fracture in the U.S.-Swiss relationship, which would have blown up and affected European opinions right at the height of the Cold War, when we wanted to win the Cold War without firing a shot. And we did not want fractured relationships in any part of Europe to detract from our main goal, which was the defeat of the Soviet Empire. Ronald Reagan's greatest achievement. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Again, thank you so much.
Oh, yes. Can we take a quick photo? I have to be. Oh, yeah.
A way to approach such issues. Well, let's. Faith, I just wanted to thank you for everything that you do, everything that you've done, and for everything that you are. You're one of the most amazing people I've ever known in my life. You've been one of my greatest friends. You've been one of the greatest patriots I know and defenders of morally ordered liberty, of our constitutional arrangements, of our entire Western civilization. You have been a rock of Gibraltar of principle, never wavering from what is good and what is right. It has been one of my life's greatest privileges to know you, to be your friend, and to be the beneficiary of your amazing support. I don't know where America would be and where I would be, or where this institute would be if it weren't for you. I thank you from the bottom of my heart, and I wish you and your wonderful family all of God's blessings, and just, I cannot tell you too much how grateful I am for everything you do and everything you are. God bless you, Faith.
Hi, Faith. I'm so proud of you. You did a great job, and it's so interesting, your book. I can't wait to read it. Thank you so much for making it possible for me to be here. Love you.
Hello, Mother. I'm so proud of you. It's been a wonderful 2 days, and your speech was great, and I love you so much. And you're really an inspiration to me and to all of us.
And Faith, congratulations. We are so excited to be here as you celebrate the Lifetime Achievement Award and also the launch of this book. We are very pleased to have this opportunity, and it's such an honor to be here and see the joy with which you're experiencing these events.
We're so proud of you, and we're very honored to be here, and it's just been a great experience so far, so thank you very much.
We really appreciate all that you did to help our country, and I really learned a lot about the history, and it was a lot of fun. I had a good time. Thank you for inviting us.
Hi, Faith. You mean the world to me, as you know. I've watched you shine for 40 years, but never so much as last night. We all love you, and you are such an inspiration to all of us.
Hi, Faith. It's Ann Yoakum. You were such an inspiration to me. Thank you for bringing me to New York and for teaching me so much about Switzerland, about America, about foreign policy, and about making friends. You're a wonderful lady, and I very much look forward to reading your book. I've already taken a peek, and what you wrote was just so touching to me. And I thank you, and I wish you all the best in everything in the future.
Hi, Faith. Here I am at the book signing for your Backwards and in High Heels book. I'm so thrilled. I was at your dinner last night too, as you know, of course. And I'm just so thrilled to be a part of your life and to have not only you, but also now the love of Switzerland as a part of mine. You know how I feel about you, and I'm just so thrilled to be here.
I'm so proud of you, what you achieved in your career. And Harry and I love you very much. Wish you the best.
Faith, it's an honor to be here. We have all learned a lot from you. You have been an inspiration to the past generations and the upcoming generations. And keep going, Faith. Keep up the good work. God bless.
Hi, Faith, my very best friend. I love you. I learned so much from you. You've been so good to us and to the world, to everybody. And I just love you. We all do. And Cause has something to say.
Hi, Faith. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be in Washington, D.C. And, of course, you know my love for you, so keep staying healthy for me. Thanks.
Okay, I think I'm a little bit emotional now. You know, I've gotten to know Faith in 1991, long time ago. I think her personality, her spirit made me to decide to move to the U.S. forever. Haven't left the country since. Become a finance professor at Arizona State, and if it hadn't been for Faith, I would never have found this beautiful country, the best place on the planet. I'm so happy to be here, and thanks really, really go back to Faith, 1991 young leader. Thank you.
A few years ago, my friend Grover Norquist called me and said, there's someone you have to meet. Actually, it was 20 years ago, and it was you, Faith. My life has changed so much because of you. You've helped me to help children all over the country find families. You did that. And I thank you. I thank God for you.